Hi, welcome to Governance Bites. I'm Mike Benicevic, and today I get to spend time with my friend Russell Hutchinson. So thank you, Russell, very much for your time.
Good to be here, Mark. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so Russell is an experienced consultant in the life insurance industry, and his business is Quote Monster or QPR Research and Chatswood Consulting are kind of essential to the life insurance industry, working with advisors and giving them the right information that they need to help clients make decisions around which products to buy. His business has been on quite a journey over the last few years, from a small business with a handful of staff operating just with the directors to moving through to an advisory board. So we wanted to talk a little bit about that journey. So thank you very much, Russell. Would you like to just maybe start with a little introduction about how that journey went?
I suppose I'd go back even further, which is that when I first started consulting, it was just me, and then it was me and Fran, and then it was me and a full-time administrator, and then I picked up another consultant, and we started to grow. And like a lot of people, I suppose that mirrors the journey of a lot of people in the financial services sector, especially small advice providers. Initially, one advisor on their own trying to make things happen, and of course as you grow incrementally. You try and make the next right decision and all of that sort of thing, but you can find yourself quite a long way into your growth and you actually haven't set up much in the way of governance at all, right? So at some point you're faced with this decision to say, wow, do we need this thing? Do we need to engage in good governance practices, and how are we going to do that? So,
right.
And I think that that's a common experience across a lot of the people that we would deal with who've grown from tiny one-person businesses into something a little bit more substantial.
Given that, I think it's 97.1% of New Zealand enterprises, about 500,000 enterprises in New Zealand are fewer than 20 staff. I'd say that's a common journey across industries as well, actually, not just in financial services.
Well, that's true. Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the common kind of rules of thumb for when you need to introduce good governance processes are things I've heard people say, for example, when you have an external shareholder. And I actually think that you probably need to put that one to one side. There's probably a milestone which comes earlier than that. And for most financial advisors, having some external governance input into how they run their business is probably essential in order to meet a variety of requirements from, code, quality of advice, license conditions, and so on.
Yes.
You probably need to have some external component.
So at what stage in your business journey did you first start engaging with your mentor?
So, I've used a variety of mentors. I've used business coaches at various different times. Obviously, we've always had external accounting. We've never just done our own accounts. And it's probably, I think we're about 7-8 years in when we started to realise that we would get value out of a good governance process. And so I would probably credit our accountants for, essentially they took us into that process very naturally, because what we found is that each time we met with them, we tended to have broader and more expansive conversations about our business as a whole, right?
Right.
So,
yes.
So that really kind of grew out of the idea of, or it grew out of the management accounting function.
Yes,
which they were taking on.
And a good accountant will often do that, right? Get involved in. So they're often the first, or one of the first places that a small business will go to get that kind of business advice. Another place a small business will often go is to a friend that has a business. And one of the things that I often experience in our industry in financial services is where I'll talk to a financial advisor about their business, and I'll say, do you use a business mentor? And they say, oh, well, I've got a friend that I work with, but he's not from our industry. And I think, well, that's a strength.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
They don't come in with the same
same
biases and the same assumptions that you do, and they challenge you on those things. So it's very valuable.
So in terms of this journey, there's probably 3 key points I'd really, really like to make. One is that if you're beginning to have an inkling that maybe you'd benefit from external governance processes, you're way past that point already. Just get on with it, So just stop worrying about it. If you're beginning to think that, go for it, And I think the second one would be that, if you think that you're going to add more cost than value, you're wrong. Don't worry about that either. Loads and loads of research finds that those companies that adopt good governance procedures grow faster, do better, have more robust solutions, like in almost any possible way, they perform better. Now, sometimes there's controversy around the direction of causality there? Was it growth?
Yes.
That came first, or was it good governance that created the growth? Our experience, and this is where I talked about our personal experience, has been that good governance has definitely helped us to grow. That's been powerful for us. And as we go through that, we came to appreciate the mechanics of governance, right? So get involved and get started. Don't spend too much time worrying about exactly how you're going to do it. Spend more time thinking about what the composition of your advisory board is going to be, about trying to get what you just described, which is some of that diversity of view, somebody maybe outside of industry, very helpful, and bring them together into the room. Once you get going, you will discover that improvements can be made in how you keep your notes, how you keep your records, how you trigger issues to come to governance review, how you tackle issues like risks and so on. But plunge on in. The water's warm.
Well, you said when you started out, particularly I think with your second point, that if you think it's time for governance or you're ready for that, you already are. If I'm running a small business, what am I talking about when I'm asking the question of myself, am I ready for governance? Am I ready for better governance?
You've probably run into some issues like maybe you've run into quality problems. Maybe you've run into competing ideas. So you've got big questions about future path or strategy. Yeah. Maybe you've run into a bunch of regulatory requirements which you want to get better perspective on how to manage. And the reality for most people in small business is that they are way too close to their own operations. And they cannot see their own assumptions, and they need formality in process to help them manage and pick their way through more complex decisions about how they interact with the commercial world. And that is really what good governance processes bring you. I mean, essentially, there's an inherent conflict at play at any moment in time, and that is, I've got these limited resources, where am I going to deploy them? And we have different ideas about how to deploy them, and those ideas set up a conflict between these competing visions of the future. And understanding what those things are and seeing them clearly and making choices through good process.
I think one of the things that I've discovered is that there's actually a lot to running a business. And when you're first starting out, you don't know it all. As soon as you take on staff before that, you may have GST creep up on you. Then you may take on staff, you have PAYE, you have employment contracts, you've got all of these sorts of things coming into play. You may have regulatory requirements depending on the industry that you're in. You've certainly got your director's duties and things in the Companies Act. And if you're coming up with most people don't start out business because they are good at starting business. They start out a business because they're good at something else, whether it be financial advice or plumbing or whatever it may be. And so if that's your skill set, and your skill set isn't starting business, then get some advice. So I would wonder whether the right time to get a mentor for a starting point is day one.
Yeah, and that's why I say I think if you're wondering about it, you've already passed the point at which you need to do it. Yeah, because it probably was day one, or day two, or day three, or somewhere in that first year. And of course, what we're talking about are businesses that are emergent, really.
Yes.
Somebody left, say, a corporate job like I did, and became self-employed and thought, right, what do I do? And they saw a market opportunity and they went after it. Of course, if we were in Silicon Valley, we'd raise some seed capital, raise a few million, go and take advice immediately. That's a good idea, actually, isn't it? But we're dealing with people who have emerging businesses.
Yes.
Yep. And so they didn't do that, and they're starting at this point, which is why, point one is, start a governance process, get moving.
So tell me about the move then from working with your accountant and your business mentor to creating an advisory board.
So initially it was two execs and our accountant, and then we added one of the team to basically handle the working parts of that in terms of the administration, pull together the agenda, what we're going to do, and so on. Gradually, it naturally began to encompass more people. So as soon as we set up the rules of, we're going to meet quarterly, we're going to review these types of decisions, we're going to have a look at these types of issues. You mentioned several there. You mentioned directors' duties, and obviously once you start exploring your director's duties, it just naturally feeds down into all those different aspects of your business. So we should be looking at risks. We should be looking at quality. We should be looking at these different areas of the business in a kind of an organised way. We should be looking at strategy. How do we tell that what we're doing is working? First of all, we have to be clear and intentional about what we're doing. And we have to pick up measurements and report on those. And gradually it meant that quite a few people in the business were involved in capturing data, creating reporting, putting that into our board process, right? So we had to then think more intentionally about what we were going to measure, what we were going to report on, and then each of the team began to get used to the idea that not only did they have a set of regular tasks, but they also had a responsibility to manage those tasks. So they had to look at the results critically and say, why was that better or worse than last quarter? Where are we going to go over the course of the next 18 months to 2 years? Because they knew they were going to have to report on that to the advisory board, right? So as we grew, it tended to change how each of the team members saw their role. Even if they weren't directly involved in that meeting, they were indirectly involved in feeding that process.
Yes.
So it had an effect on everybody.
Right.
And first of all, you don't know how bad you are at it until you start, right? Which is just another way of saying there's so much more room for improvement in your business than you realise right now. Yeah.
Yes.
And then as you start working your way through those things, you begin to appreciate the iterative cycles of measure, analyse, discuss, critique, set new plans, and reset and repeat, quarter by quarter by quarter. And that then feeds into a virtuous cycle.
And having some information and some numbers in particular to give you a feel for how your business is tracking and following those over time is so tremendously valuable, isn't it?
It is enormously valuable, and like I say, we've got better and better at it. So now we tend to have, obviously we've got a strategic plan for the company, but we also tend to have, year by year work plans for each of the different disciplines that we need to take account of, whether that's risk, security, privacy, market pricing, building staff skills, those types of things. So there's a bunch of those types of issues. And then also within each of the functional areas within the business, they tend to produce 1 or 2 year plans about where they intend to go. So these roadmaps are tremendously useful, and really they emerged from implementing governance. So
wow.
Now, and then of course we grew from there to start adding more external members. So
yes.
Right now our governance board includes Steve Burgess, who's a compliance expert, and Camilla Tumai, who's an advisor, or has been an advisor that's run larger advice teams too.
Yes.
And so they give us valuable perspectives. And then this last year we added 3 additional advisory boards, so Northern, Central and Southern research advisory boards.
Yes, right.
To provide a governance structure to the kind of input that we get all the time from advisors on our research processes. Yep,
yes.
That's right. So,
right.
So we're fans,
Yes.
We're big fans.
Quite one of the things that we do here is my business is different. My industry is different. I'm not for profit, therefore, I don't need this because. What do you say to that?
Say that's rubbish, basically. Yes, you are different. That's absolutely true, but it doesn't mean that you won't benefit from good governance processes. And if you're spending a lot of time creating rules to kind of change what is like this core body of knowledge around how to do good governance, which has basically been developed across say the Western world, emerging from early corporations and capital markets and so forth. These methods of governance which are about ensuring transparency and rigor being applied to whatever area of our business we're looking at. if you're basically saying, my decade or two's experience just on my own is going to trump all those hundreds of thousands of years combined experience of all those other people that have thought hard about this, had loads of market experience about it, done loads and loads of things that you haven't done, then I would say, I doubt that.
Yes.
I think you should be probably trying to say, let's try and conform to this core body of knowledge first, and see how that runs, and see how that develops us, and then let's see maybe if we need some changes. That would be our first approach. Yeah.
Well, I guess one final question for you then, given your experience, what advice would you give to a business that's kind of moving through this journey?
I would definitely get started. That's the first thing. Stop worrying about it and get on with it. I'd pick some people that have got some different experience to your own, and I'd pick some so there's a nice mix of people that are going to be in the room. Don't make it too big or too complicated yet. Don't get stuck with what you might call organisational issues. Which piece of board software am I going to use? Don't even need one to kick off, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe you do later, but you'll have a much better idea of your requirements if you start. And then you'll be able to choose those other things. Definitely get somebody in that room who has had some formal training. So somebody who's done the director's course, say, at the Institute of Directors, one of those types of things. And let's try and run it according to that body of knowledge we were just talking about. It's kind of like a way we know how to do governance. Let's try and fit in with that.
Yes.
And get those and cover off those basics right. And then everything else will fall out of that. Once you start committing yourself to a process with the people and on a regular schedule, then that's great. And there are loads of other sort of small issues, to avoid. Don't think that because you put say your lawyer in the advisory board that now you're getting a bunch of free legal advice. Separate the paid from separate those two roles. Those two roles are different. That's so understand that. Understand that you do have to pay. Probably. If you're really early and it's a very small business, then okay. Then just create the structures, and it's probably going to be some stakeholders. It might be the CEO of the kitchen if that's your partner. You want to create a more formal method of reporting to them rather than just coming home and moaning about your day. So there can be ways to do it with very, very small businesses. I'm assuming we're a bit further on than that. You're going to have some paid people in the room, and you're going to be really clear about what their roles are. Yeah.
Great. Well, Russell, thank you very much for your time today. That's been very valuable. I'll look forward to catching up again soon.
Great fun.
And see you next episode.